This is To The Point, a RYNO experience. Voted one of the top home services marketing and operations podcasts. Cutting through the bullshit and getting to the point.
Hello, To The Point listeners. It's your host, Chris Yano. God, right out of the gate, I lost it just by looking at you, Paul. Just by looking at your face made me laugh. Actually, or maybe it was your dancing or whatever you call that. So. Dancing. Yeah. To The Point listeners, thank you so much for tuning back in, even though Paul's back on again this week.
I am. Welcome back.
I am your host, Chris Yano of To The Point Home Services Podcast, along with my co-host, Mr. Tall, Paul Redman, my man. What's up?
Thanks for the welcome back. Again, this is 2 weeks in a row. You get to hear my voice again, hopefully, if you let me talk. But I'm excited, man. Today, we're doing something a little different, but for me, it's kind of the same, hanging out with you guys.
That's right. So, we have our guest today. I've known her for a few years.
A couple. And you get to know her more.
I know her pretty well. So, it has been brought to my attention that part of the branding, the marketing of RYNO up to the point that has me in it says, hey, the founder of RYNO. Well, just so it's super clear, I am the co-founder of RYNO, along with my beautiful, smart, incredibly intelligent better half, Mrs. Anna Yano, who is the COO and co-founder of RYNO Strategic Solutions, is in the studio sitting right across from me today, and you're going to get to hear why we tout on her so much and why she is such a credible source here for all of our growth and part of our big vision and really kind of the backbone of the business. I tell this to everybody. She doesn't hear it, so those who I've met with have heard me say it. But the reason is I love what one, she's got a heart to serve, the trades, and also to serve the staff here and to do what's best for everyone. She has a heart to help people. She'll tell you she's a fixer. She loves to fix things. And in this business, there's never anything that you don't ever have to rely on that. There's nothing to there's always something to fix. But I want her to share what the things that we've done internally that have been, whether it's her vision or she's the one that's executing on it. I always say this too. I'm a shitty manager of people. I recognize my strengths. That's not one of them. I care about them. I'm not great at managing people, and it's just not what I'm best at. So I really don't.
I feel loved.
But I care about you, So, but I want to introduce real quick, Anna Yano. Hey, welcome back. This is the second time you've been on the podcast. You were on in an earlier episode. I don't remember the number of it, but it was with Charlene Ierna from Ierna's down in Tampa Bay. But welcome back to the show.
Thanks, guys, for having me.
Are you excited?
I am excited.
I want you to relax and just treat it like you're sitting in executive retreat with myself and Paul and Mike. Yeah,
I think she looks relaxed. She's kind of sitting back, comfortable. Looks like she's had some sun recently, so she's ready to go.
Yeah.
Can I open with kind of a vulnerable moment?
Oh my gosh. Yes, please.
I want to share too. Anna's like my comfort zone. So this is our studio.
I'm your soul sister.
Yeah, this is now an intervention on you, Chris.
Okay.
No, two things I want to share with you. We did a leadership retreat up in Prescott, Arizona, or Prescott, as they say in Arizona, a couple months ago. And Chris and I, we drove separate. So Chris and I were driving back. And you know me, I like to ask questions. So I'm asking him questions about his journey. There's parts of Chris's story and Rhino's story that I've either forgotten or, was still trying to piece together. And he was telling me his story from, where it started to where it is now. And it's crazy. And so many ups and downs. Well, I asked him, through that entire journey, who was the single most influential person? And I thought for sure it would have been someone along the lines of Mike Branson, or I don't know, selfishly, maybe myself. And I shouldn't have been, but I was surprised. He said, Anna, from day one. And I meant to tell you that, Anna, when we had a phone call privately today, just you and I meant to tell you that. I'm going to tear up. But his conviction in saying it, just how you have been the person that's made him who he is today, is pretty awesome. So I meant to share that.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Yano.
You're welcome.
And vulnerable piece number 2.
Oh, vulnerable piece.
So when I first met Chris, I was like, man, I want to work with this guy. We can really, really work well together. We balance each other well. But I was really nervous. It was like the biggest change I was ever doing in my career, probably the riskiest thing I ever did. And I flew out and I met Anna, and I was like, oh yeah, now it all makes sense. This isn't just some crazy guy running around talking. Like, I get it. This is a real business that's really capable of doing big things. So anyways, I'm done talking.
Yes. So thanks for sharing. That's great. I meant it. See, I say really nice things about you. It's just, it might be perceived that I'm the one that started this company. I certainly couldn't have done it without you. The business would not be where it is and what it is today without you. So thank you. And thanks for joining us. I know this is out of your comfort zone. I know you don't like to do this kind of things. I don't like to put yourself out there, but you're going to do it today.
I know.
And because you have a lot of value to share with our listeners that can help them in their businesses, regardless if it's HVAC, it really doesn't even matter the business, to be honest with you. You'll probably have some new friends listening to this podcast that we'll talk about. But I want to share a few things just about what you've implemented into the business. But before we do that, let's learn who Mrs. Yano is, besides married to a guy that looks exactly like Justin Timberlake, who has equal charisma and very humble. Just like
I'm so lucky.
You're
really blessed.
Pretty much the luckiest girl alive. So let's ask a few questions. So I know you've played the game Would You Rather, so I don't have to worry about this. So we're going to start with a little game of Would You Rather. And we're going to let our listeners know, who is Anna Yano. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. Would you rather always say everything on your mind or never speak again?
Everything on my mind.
Of course. This is,
like, you guys knew that before there was another option.
So this is actually part of what makes you an exceptional leader, is that you're not afraid to have the difficult conversations. You are not afraid to speak what's on your mind, but you've backed it up with some sort of like proof, knowledge, vetting. Like, I can't win an argument with you even when I'm right, because you remember shit that I don't remember and you use it against me. And that's not fair.
And there's a leadership takeaway there, not to get too far into the podcast episode, but I tell new employees when they are onboarding with us and we do kind of a formal check-in one-on-one, I say that the best thing about this company and working for Anna in particular is you're always going to know where you stand. You're never going to wonder, like, did she think that was a good decision? Maybe. No, you're going to know exactly if it was a good or bad decision, and then she's going to be over it.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, it's good. Second, I actually must save that one. Would you rather have X-ray vision or magnified hearing?
Oh, that's hard.
You've recently had both.
Yeah. I would say magnified hearing.
Yeah, I think so too. Me too. Actually, God, that might drive you crazy. You kind of have magnified hearing in some of these offices.
X-ray vision outside of like seeing through people's clothes and like seeing in the next room. Like, what real benefit is there? But hearing, there's a lot of like.
I guess now that I think of it,
I think you named it.
I think I know. You know, when I was in Memphis, I was staying in my hotel room, and let's just say that there was some of the hotel rooms were full. And they were busy and those walls were thin. So I didn't really need magnified hearing. That's for sure. Good grief. It was terrible. I picked a 3-star. That was a bad idea. Okay, last one.
Nothing but the best for you.
Last one. I know. I don't mind it. Would you rather spend the night in a luxury hotel room or camping surrounded by beautiful scenery?
Come on. These are silly. Of course, I'd stay in a luxury hotel room.
Well, that's weird, because you were just camping around beautiful scenery because you were at a leadership retreat, right?
I was, but I would have preferred it be in luxury hotel room.
Understood.
I can learn in both environments, but I think I thrive more in a luxury hotel room.
So talk about that, because one thing that we preach at RYNO is education, always trying to make everybody better every month. You know, you need to walk out significantly better than when you came into RYNO. We want to make you better as a human being, as a professional, all these things. So we have our education requirements in place, our education things that do to make all the staff better for our customers, right?
Yep.
Well, now we have to practice what we preach. So we do different things to make ourselves better, different trainings to make ourselves better. We've done the traction book that we're doing as an executive team and a leadership team. But you did this leadership conference, we'll call it. So first off, why did you do it? And then what just explain to listeners like kind of what it was.
So we have the Masogi benefit. So for those of you that don't know what a Masogi is a RYNO benefit that we pay for an experience or a learning that you can go out and do something. But the goal really is to either put somebody outside of their comfort zone or to give them a skill or kind of a wow experience for the year. So
something they'll never forget, right?
Right. Never forget. This was certainly something I'll never forget. So in doing so, I was doing different searches and I was looking for opportunities that would combine my ability to grow as a leader, but also push me well outside of my comfort zone. So I did find this, I did find a website just kind of in blind Google searches. 97% of the people that attend this event are usually by referral. So there's very, very few. Actually, I think I was the only person who just Googled it and showed up.
Really?
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, only one there. It's like very referral driven and referral based. But I wanted to get outside of my comfort zone. So there were a lot of elements that were around growing professionally and growing as a leader and spending time with other people that are in similar roles and powerhouses in roles that are what I would say are well beyond what my skill set is, but also getting very, very uncomfortable, which is exactly what it did in lots of ways.
Yeah. You stayed in the tent for like 8 days. How long you were there?
Yeah, eight nights, I think, in a tent.
But
a luxury tent. It was like a glamping tent, so I did have a bed in there.
And what was?
But I had a roommate.
Emily, is that her name?
Aaron.
Fuck, I wasn't even close.
That was not too far. Started with an E.
Aaron. Hi, Aaron. Shout out to you. Not that she's listening to this, but you put yourself outside of your comfort zone. You accomplished your misogi, and did you get better? Did you walk out of there better than you went in?
For sure. I mean, I could sit and tell you for 2 hours takeaways from it.
Can you just give me a couple takeaways?
Oh man.
Or like the ones that were the most impactful. I've noticed some. I want to hear what you have to say, and then I'll tell you what I've noticed, and we'll see if they match.
Okay. So one of mine was to be a more compassionate leader instead of a reactional. Like it's really easy to kind of react, especially when something's happening or you get, like, let's be honest, there's a lot of people around here and you get oddball requests and things that are sometimes I'm like, what is your problem? Why are you asking for that? Mm-hmm. So I wanted to be able to be more patient and thoughtful in what I sometimes think are dumb requests or strange things so that I could understand differently where those things come from or what are the drivers or what are the motivators or why do people feel entitled to those things without just judging immediately. So that was one. Okay. So like leading more with compassion, having more patience, and honestly, just like learning from people that were there. There's a lot of people that come from incredible backgrounds, lots of experience, and I just wanted to absorb some of that because much of what happens around here is just instinct from me or like, oh, I think this sounds like a good idea. So like being around other people who have lots of experience and are making decisions for other motivations was thoughtful and inspiring for me to be able to be part of it.
Got it. So we talk about trying to be the dumbest person in the room so we can learn from the smart people. Where do you think that you were at in the list of people that were there? You think you were in the middle? Bottom?
Yeah, I would.
Because there were some big players there.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I would put myself in the middle of the room. Like middle. How
many people were there roughly?
There were about 35 participants and maybe about 12 to 15 like other leaders who were part of the organization.
Okay, so like a fairly intimate like group.
Oh
like
yeah, for sure.
Okay, so but
mostly men, like 75% male, 25% female.
Okay, so did you perfect your Care Bear stare?
You're stupid.
I had to throw that out there. I've actually seen the compassion in you change, and I've even kind of experienced a little bit as I, even in here today with just some of the employees. But you've actually always kind of had it in you. It's just like I've seen you be compassionate with a lot of people, and you're super empathetic too. I mean, I know your heart, but when you step into this office, it's different. Like you shift straight into, I'm business mode. My heart's in the right place, but I'm business mode. I'm by the book. I get things done. I'm very low risk. Like we differ in some of these things. Not that I don't care.
A little bit.
I care. Yeah, slightly. But I was so glad to see you step outside of your comfort zone and go to this retreat and do this thing. And it's first off, I've got, 4 kids, 3 in the house, and you being gone for 7-8 days was quite the task for me. So thank you for also giving me an experience this week of trying to accomplish, or this past week of trying to accomplish things. And we realized just how much we really need you around the house. But I'm glad that you went and had that experience. So let's do this for our listeners. So thank you for sharing that experience. I love that you're doing that because you lead from the front, right? You do what we say. We practice what we preach. But let the listeners know. So you're the COO at RYNO. The only reason I'm the CEO is because it fit. It's only really the only title that fit for me. So really, you probably ought to have that title too. But tell me, what is your role at RYNO? Like, what is everything that you oversee? So that way, when you start to give examples of what we're doing, people understand what your role is that falls under.
Oh man, my role, I guess in the in the simplest of terms, is making sure that the products that we're selling are, what we're delivering
Client
on.
fulfillment. Yep.
That our staff is trained, that we're adequately staffed, that we're doing all of the right things, that employees feel happy and satisfied in their roles, developing processes, everything. Overseeing lots of departments, leadership roles.
That doesn't
mentoring.
sound like that is, you made it sound simple. There's so much more than that.
I know. There's a lot. I mean, I don't know. I'm busy. I'm a busy gal for sure. I still service clients. I have accounts that I manage so that it allows me to have perspective of what our employees are experiencing when they manage accounts. It also keeps me calibrated on the products and services that we're delivering so that if that it allows me to be sure of what we're doing and what teams are doing and how we're executing so that I'm not blindly just trusting the process or listening to other people, but actually experiencing it myself.
Yeah, so you're staying involved in the business so you can kind of keep your finger on the pulse of what's actually going on with staff, what's being delivered. So you can't just step away, like put processes in place and then completely step out. Like you're still kind of putting feelers out there constantly and staying involved so that way you understand the direction of the business and client fulfillment and employee, things like that, right?
Absolutely.
Super important. So that is applicable to everyone, right? To any business. You have to, you've heard the term of you have to work, you need to start to work on the business versus in the business, but you kind of got to do a hybrid of both, right? So the people part of the business, right? Like the employee side of the business. And Paul, you can chime in when you need to, but I just want to ask this part. When I sit, like for instance, I love when I get to talk about leadership at the company. I feel like I've had quite a few conversations around leadership. Anytime we have partnerships, they want to understand what does RYNO infrastructure look like to support this type of a partnership. So like with a Linux as a strategic partner or whomever, manufacturer, whatever it is, if it's an industry organization, I love to talk about our leadership. Producer Kyle, can you calm down back there? Jeez.
Yeah.
Throwing shit.
What's funny is Kyle's always yelling at me for being loud when the podcast is shooting because I'm always in the kitchen screaming. So Kyle, pipe down, buddy.
Yeah, man, pipe down. So
Kyle.
Producer Kyle. He's like, oh shit, of all guests to be sitting in here, it's Anna. Holy shit, I lost my train of thought. Oh, so I get to talk about leadership. I always love to say that, and here's what I'll say, is Anna and I, the business has done so well, it started with you and myself, and I was on the sales and marketing side, and you were really on client fulfillment and making sure like we invoiced people and we paid for things, important stuff. But those two things complemented each other so well. And we're going to get into this piece about us working together later. But what I always will say to people is that I believe you're a phenomenal leader. And this isn't me like kissing ass. I don't have to kiss her ass or like be saying these things to try and make her, to butter her up. I say that and I mean it. I say that she makes amazing leaders. But what I think is great is that when you have conversations with people, whether they're encouraging or tough, I will say constructive, that you always have facts to back up what you're going through with it. But behind that is your heart to help, whether it be the staff, the customers, because we take it personal. Like we listen, we have client fulfillment is got to be number one, because without customers, we don't have a business, but without employees, we can't serve our customers. So they're like neck and neck, but I love your heart for our staff and the things that you've put in place to make this a phenomenal place to work. and to make them feel loved and to feel appreciated. And so the mixture has been really good. I love sharing that you're able to provide that into leadership to help to create good leaders, and you're great at managing people and you're great at creating managers. All things that are important to scaling a company is leadership, right? We've heard it from multiple guests on this podcast. So if you're listening, leadership is key ingredient to scaling your business, but you got to have good leaders for your leaders too. So, and people that are constantly creating leaders. And it's not just a, hey, let me do it for you. It's a, hey, let me show you. So that way you can do it yourself next time type of mentality. I'm the guy that says, I'll just take it and do it. Let me make a phone call, and which is terrible. Like that's not how you create managers, but you've done well with those things. So I love being able to say why this business has worked. Because when somebody's like, oh wait, your wife is the COO, you're the CEO. I'm like, yeah, we're exact opposite. It's why it's complement each other well. But we have support for each other, and we know how to leave business, and personal, until executive retreats. Yeah.
That's when all bets are off.
And then, thank goodness, tall Paul's 6'8", and his wingspan is long, so he can hold us apart, and we can find our peaceful way to the middle.
Guys, do we need to take a break? Do we need to take a 10-minute break? That's Paul's favorite saying.
I may never say that again, because last time I said, "Can we take a break?" Chris said, "Shut up and sit down." We won't take a break, but we worked through it. But one of the things, Anna, if I could describe your role in our last executive retreat, we're going through an exhaustive process of really examining the business. And we were going through a list of things that make this a great place for employees. And then we're going through a list of things that make this a really high performance place for clients. And we discovered that there's this natural tension between those two things, or you discovered it. And you said something that was super profound. It's like, hey, you want to be a great place to work, but not at the expense of client performance. And you want to be the best performing marketing agency for our clients without the expense of our employees' life and satisfaction. And so where we're at in our journey now is finding that appropriate tension. And so that's how I would describe what you do, which is
super important. God, you said it way better than me.
There's times in every organization where how you have to prioritize shifts. And there were many years where in our organization, it had to be so customer driven, and it was at the expense of my own job satisfaction, employees' job satisfaction. It's grinding all the time. But you need to be able to grow to a spot that allows you to make those pivots and shifts. And I'm incredibly thankful that we've gotten to that spot where I can truly say I can equally balance and say employees are just as important to me as clients are, and clients are just as important as employees. And focusing on both of those needs to be my highest priority all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everyone listening to this is, involved in the trades. Obviously the labor game is important, and it's almost like it's easier to retain a customer. It's easier to retain an employee as well. So you got to treat them well, and you have to do things, I think, that make them smarter. You have to do things that make them, but you have to do things that make them feel loved. You have to do things there's a lot of stuff that you have to do. And what you did 10 years ago might not be what you have to do today. It might be more, but you got to make sure that it comes from a genuine place of caring about them. Because I feel like when you fake it, it's super clear. So don't be an asshole. Be what, Paul?
Be authentic. Unless you're authentically an asshole.
Unless you're authentically an asshole.
With that statement sometimes.
Yeah. And I know some of those.
It's not mutually exhaustive. Right, Anna? Am I right?
Yeah, you are right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So one thing that I can appreciate that we do is we have this exercise that I hope actually changes going into our next executive retreat. We do with all of our employees, we do right, wrong, missing, confusing. Can you explain what right, wrong, missing, confusing is and the purpose of us doing it? How someone listening right now could do the same thing in their own company to get, because the reason we're doing is trying to see what does our leadership team come up with? What does our staff come? So can you just kind of share that process that these guys might be able to take away and do?
So every year we do every year we do an executive retreat, and that allows us to plan for what is next year. What are our highest priorities? What are our goals? So we will execute a process called right, wrong, missing, confusing, where we'll send out an anonymous survey to all of the employees. And that's really what it is what are the things that we are really doing right? What are we good at? What are we really doing wrong? And we do things wrong. We can't be perfect all the time. We're humans. What are the things that just, what are the things that aren't working for you? What is missing? Like, what do we just not have? And that could be something as simple as stable internet, or which has been a challenge for us, or, a certain body or a certain role that we feel like we've grown into needing. And what's confusing? What's the thing that every time it comes up, we're all like, I don't really know like how to do that, or it changes so often that it's confusing, or the process doesn't feel mapped out. So we send those surveys out. They are all gathered and compiled and put into a document that we can sit and review. Now, I think a really important part of the exercise is that as an executive team, we do that process ourselves too, without looking at what the employees have provided.
Correct.
And it allows us to, from our perspective in the business, to be able to document those things. So that it's not skewed, and that we're not just focused on employee resolution or employee challenges, but also our own. And it also allows us, once we do start to review what they've suggested, to ensure or kind of make sure, like, is our pulse right? Like, are we so far out there, and are we so removed that we just don't get it? And I love that when we do this exercise, it always feels like we're really there. Like, not that there's not wild cards that sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, that's totally overlooked that. But I think that we're usually pretty on the pulse, and it's a challenging exercise. Like, right, wrong, missing, confusing only has one like good category. There's only one that gives you the warm and fuzzies, and you get three that you kind of get shit on. And
totally.
That's hard. And you got to kind of have thick skin. But the purpose of it is to make sure that our team understands that their opinions count, and how they feel matters, and what they need is important. And then it allows us to really start crafting, what does the next year look like? And we bucket all of that feedback and information into big groups. And then we spend the next 2 days talking about what are the deliverables that come from that. If this is wrong, how do we fix it? What do we think is the right thing? What are the steps we need to take? So it really helps us to explore and find, where do we feel like we need to make improvements or changes, but also absolutely considering the entire team, everybody at all levels, and giving them a safe place to be able to do it anonymously, so they don't have to worry one way or the other about how that feedback will be received.
Yep.
But it's hard, right? Like, it's hard.
It's hard, yeah.
If someone
brutal.
says, what's wrong, and it says leadership, you're like, are they talking about me?
Shit.
Are they talking about
Which
someone else?
leader?
Like, it's brutal.
I'm like, yeah, it's not me. It's got to be Paul.
But one of the, the consistent outcomes through that exercise is a lot of things that are either wrong, missing, or confusing, which is what hurts for us to hear the most, are really oftentimes misunderstood.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or maybe we mentioned it in January, and then we just assumed everyone understood what it meant, and so we don't have to mention it again. And so then as we like regroup and bake those things into our annual plan, I think the thing that's most important is like re-communicating. Here's where we are. Here's what we said. Here's what we are. And Anna, you're like so good at that, because Chris and I go through that exercise, and we're like, okay, on to the next thing. And you're like, no, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. You said that this little thing, someone said there wasn't Post-it notes. Who is responsible for bringing in Post-it notes? Like, following it all the way through is super, super important.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that. It is like, this is something that we've learned from having done this a few times now, is the context matters. Mm-hmm. So like, we still have to dial it in, because, or the fact that maybe this person doesn't know something is in the works. Like, so there's things but you still address it, but I like, as painful it is to go through the wrong and the missing, which missing, a lot of times we know, like, usually we almost are completely aligned with what's missing, as long as it's not like a ruler, like a sharp, extra Sharpies or something like that. But it is really good to hear, or the perception of the employees to see what is important to them. Is there any consistency in it? Is this really something that needs to be fixed? If not, we need to at least address it to explain why. So I love that we do this separate, and then even this past one we were so aligned on so many topics that I was like, man, like, we are in sync for the most part with our staff, and that's progress for us, because when we did the other one, it was not as close.
Right. I mean, our challenges are their challenges. We are not exempt from feeling those things, and I think that is the spot where you can have empathy and compassion, because it's like, we're not exempt from experiencing those things. We feel them too.
Yeah. Yep. And we had, one of the things was, as we've grown at RYNO in our Phoenix location, is we have suites. right? And so not everybody is all together in one spot, and one might have bigger energy than the other. Depends on where the developers are. I'm kidding.
The developers are at home.
Our developers are amazing, by the way. But like the vibe can be different, when Paul's in here, Ed throws everything off. But one thing that was said was, man, we kind of wish we were all, back together. And, some of you might have saw in a recent Facebook post, we recently just purchased our brand new office, RYNO office building, to bring everybody back together. We listened.
Yeah.
Now we needed to do that too. So it was time, but we listened and we get to bring everybody back together in a new RYNO building in 2023.
I think it's important too. Part of the process is to really let the employees know that, like, hey, we're not pretending we have a perfect company. We're not pretending this is perfectly polished and designed for your convenience and the customer's performance or convenience or whatever. It is a work in process at all times, or progress at all times. Yeah. And, showing where all the parts are, like, that's kind of what the process is you're just laying it out in front of the employees. Like, here's all the broken parts and here's where they sit. And like, the goal hopefully is that they would take some ownership in that and say, like, oh, I can help make this a better place to work. I can help make these problems that affect me and impact me so much, better.
Yeah.
Well, and it's fascinating to see year over year how they compound, right? Like, last year, the challenges that we resolved, some of those result in new challenges this year that were unanticipated. And sometimes you make those changes and you end up with a new challenge that compounded from a different. So there's always something to work on. And there's never a time that I believe our organization will ever be at a spot that we don't have to focus on those types of things, and that we don't have problems that need to be looked at and addressed and resolved.
Yeah. That's like I said, you're a fixer and there's always something to be fixed.
you kind of, this will sound weird, but you kind of disarm the employee to a degree if they're like, really spun up about something that they don't like, a certain process or a certain program or a lack of something. You're like, look, man, here it is. Like, we're aware of it and we want to fix it and we want something different or better or whatever it is. Like, takes it away from them.
Yeah. And you can prioritize. Like, you have to prioritize what, ultimately it is a balance. Like, and it's just, you got to go through it to try and get to this perfect. I don't think the balance is ever perfect, by the way, but you can try to get it as close as you can when I'm talking in regards to employee satisfaction and client fulfillment. So, but I think what is a good metric to measure is turnover and retention rate of customers. Like, so those are two things that would, what I guess would show what the outcome of those two things are beyond our control, is how they feel. So, but I also it's been really cool to, like, you mentioned the Misogi, which is a benefit we give to all employees. As some of you guys know, heard before, producer Kyle used it last year to take a bull riding school, and he did it. He was bull riding and he survived it. And I do love that because we love giving experiences. We previously had RYNO X, which is the X stands for experiences. We love giving experiences not only to our employees but to our kids and to our customers. We want the experience of working with RYNO to be one that's great. And hopefully it's an experience that grows businesses and creates experiences for their employees, but also for ours. So we do some things to enhance the experience of our employees. So I want to go down that path. And we call our employees family. We call our customers family because that's what it is to us. It's not a cliche term that we use. It's how we genuinely feel. It's family. Our partners, strategic partners, are family. But in regards to our staff, let the listeners know what are some of the things that we've implemented. And what I love about this is that when you shared this at your leadership conference with some of these people who are significantly larger than us, I mean, some companies in the 9 figures, one that's in the 10 figure, like big companies, and they're like, no shit, I'm going to implement these things into my business. So share some of the things that we've put in place for our employees in regards to benefits besides, like, the basic stuff, like the normal stuff, but kind of share with the things that we've put in place that have been successful. And even if it's some things that we've kind of done and changed and why and things like that, but just some things that the listeners could also do to help make the, employment better.
Sure. I think one easy one that gets overlooked is employees having their birthday off.
Love it.
And for me, I always I hate the idea of when you ask somebody, like, what'd you do for your birthday? It's like, oh, I worked all day and then I went to dinner. So I just feel like that's a crappy way to spend your birthday. It's one day a year that you get to celebrate yourself. And I just don't think sitting at your job, even if you like your job, is the way to spend it. So we give employees their birthday off if it falls on a work day. I don't care if they want to lay around and watch TV or what they want to do. I just don't want them at the office, and I don't want their birthday to be spent sitting here with us. We can celebrate their birthday or that on a different day, but I'd rather them not be here. So that one's I think a really easy benefit that has big value. Another one that was new this year and has been really well received. I wish more people were taking advantage of it, because if they did, I think they would understand the impact, and the people who have done it are like mind blown. And that is a house cleaning benefit. And once a month, employees have an option. They can choose from extra benefits. One of those benefits is a massage, so they can go out and get a massage. And that's really like, we want you to relax. We want you to take care of yourself, you to be able to focus on yourself for a little bit.
It's not that kind of massage, Paul. Stop laughing.
I'm not laughing.
You guys are so immature.
I want Kyle
her.
to edit that out, because I'm not comfortable with that insinuation.
Nope, it's Dan. Keep going.
Nope.
Immature.
Come on, Kyle. Cut it out.
Keep going.
And then the house cleaning benefit, I really love this one. And as somebody who likes to come home to a clean house, like when your house is in chaos and you come home and there's crap everywhere, I just feel like it changes your mindset. It changes the way your brain is. When you walk in and it's clean and you can smell that it's clean, it really allows you to kind of like just enjoy the moment, enjoy the evening. And especially for those of us that have families that are running around, and if you get your house cleaned with a family, it looks like shit the next day.
Yeah.
But it still is really nice that day. But I also love the time that it gives back, because most of the time people who are full-time employed are cleaning on the weekends. So it's not uncommon for Saturday morning, everybody's up and they're cleaning toilets and wiping counters and doing laundry. And I
grew up.
Right. And I love that it gives them not only that moment when they come home of everything is clean, but it also gives them the time back when it's valuable to them on a weekend, where they can participate in things that they might have otherwise missed, or enjoyed that time with their family, or just relaxing, which is what weekends are about, rather than cleaning their house. So I think that putting that little bit of extra money on somebody's paycheck has no value, right? It gets crapped away at Amazon, or it's a meal here or there. It's not really valuable. And I think that when you do something like that that's so tangible and valuable in time, that it's so well received, and it's like an incredible investment into your employees' well-being. So those are two that I really like.
And I'll just add, you should see the look on people's faces when you let them know your employer is paying for your housekeeper, or that's, to an outsider. What about to your spouse when you're like, hey, it's our kickoff meeting and Anna and Chris are going to pay for our house to get cleaned once a month. That's a big deal.
Yeah. I like what it does for, I do love coming home to a clean house, even though with 3 kids in the house now, that it gets trashed. It's super quick.
That. It's there's a maybe 1 hour shelf life, but it's worth it.
But it can shift the dynamic between you and your spouse for that evening when you go home, and nobody has to, it's clean, you feel better, it feels good. Now you might yell at your kids for messing it up, but you do kind of get that time back together. So there's a double win to it. Yeah, so.
I think another big one that is really impactful. Now, this is time consuming and, has a cost to it, so it's not for everybody. But that when new hires come on board, we coordinate lunches for them for their first 2 weeks of employment. Yeah. And that is lunches with other team members. So we'll grab people from different departments that don't get to work together or spend time together very often, and we strategically match them with a new employee. And it allows that new employee over their first 2 weeks of employment to go out at our expense, have lunches, and just get to know who they're working with. It's not about training. It's not about RYNO. It's just about who are you and who am I and what are we both doing here, and creating friendships and familiar faces, so that as you do go through training and you do get to meet other people, that they're familiar, and it's not it's not meeting somebody for the first time. It gives you tangible things to connect to them with, so that you feel like you've been ingrained into our culture and into our family, and you're not just an outsider who's walking into an office for the first time.
Yeah, and when we do the the survey, or what is it 90 days or whatever, when we always ask we're trying to get a feel for how's onboarding going for each of the new hires. This is always one of the key things that they're talking about is this new hire lunch, which, by the way, during COVID was something that we struggled through because we didn't get that opportunity.
Right, yeah.
And we saw the effects of that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's really, It is so important to be able to create environments and ways for your employees to do things that aren't just about work.
Yep.
Like it
Yeah.
really
100%.
is. It's why we do team builders. It's why we do volunteer days. It's why we schedule those lunches. That just having a relationship that is strictly about work isn't deep enough for the type of work that we do and for the type of collaboration that we need for our clients. So for us to invest the extra time and effort and money into creating those experiences allows people to connect better, to care about each other deeper, to have connections and bonds that allow them to work a little bit more cohesively when they're being collaborative.
Yeah,
I learned a lot through COVID with you guys, watching this affect you so much. Like watching the impact of not having an environment where you could go and sit and have lunch. Like to me, it was like, okay, it's just something we're going to get through it. But like just to be transparent, it wore on you guys. Like it was really hard for your company to move forward without having these things.
Yeah, it was really difficult. I mean, those were like some of the things that some of these lifts have started to change, and mask mandates and vaccinations. Like one of the things that I was most excited to start to come back and say, oh, great. Well, whoever's comfortable, like let's start going back to doing lunches together, because they really are important and you don't realize it until, again, when you do a review, maybe 60 days later, and consistently over and over and over again, it's like the number one thing people come back to is how important those lunches were to them.
What would you say the cost is for one employee to have their 2 weeks lunch benefit?
We're probably about $1,000. It's probably about $1,000. It's usually about 2 weeks of lunches that they're going on, and it's probably about $1,000 investment in that onboarding experience.
Yep.
And from an ROI perspective, one, I believe it's there, but two, I don't think there's a way you can accelerate all the touch points the person gets within a 2 week period any other way.
Well, and the secondary benefit, right, is a lot of teams there are teams that within RYNO that don't work together, right? Like our development team doesn't spend much time with our billing department. So it allows me, when I'm pairing up lunches, to be able to grab people that don't work together naturally and still put them in that environment. So there is not only the benefit for the new hire, but there's also the benefit for the existing employees who haven't been able to connect with other people because their jobs don't naturally cross over.
Yeah.
And how great, like as executives or business owners, like you kind of forget how nice it is to have somebody buy your lunch. So think about the existing employees are like, wow, I get to meet Josh and I get to go have, a great burrito for $12 and not have to pay for it. Like you forget about that when you.
And then you find out when you send them to lunch and they're like, I'm going to take the Wagyu steak.
Has that happened? Name names.
I don't think that's ever happened. I think
there
maybe
have been
one.
We've had one or two that maybe were a little exorbitant that we had to pump the brakes on.
Now you learn a lot about someone when they order steak and lobster.
Right?
Lunch, so.
On your dime.
Yep, exactly.
What I think that happens, though, is what we're trying to do is create a meaningful relationship. And it's not that you got to be best friends, but just a culture of caring about one another, because the more you care about one another, the more you want to fight for one another, and which in turn is what's ultimately best for client fulfillment, is when people want to really help each other. And sometimes that means going outside of your job description to help each other, or maybe even outside of your time that you're supposed to be working to help, But whatever it is that it's what we say, family. You want to help your family at all. Like even when they do shit that's not right or you disagree with, you're wanting to help them, and it's intentionally wanting to help them, and it's not fake. You're trying to create that relationship, and that bond is probably a better word between them. One, for them, but two, also to put out exactly what we want to do, and that's be the best possible digital marketing agency for the home service industry. Yep. But you can't do it without your staff being tight and in a culture of caring. So another thing that we've done too, you mentioned service days, you kind of blew past it. I know those who've listened to heard me talk about it, it's important to us. And yes, it can get costly if you look at it short-sighted, but again, it's another way of us giving an experience, not only to ourselves, but to our staff and also to whomever it is that we're serving in the community, a chance for us to all bond over giving to someone else. Can you talk about what a service day looks like for us? This is something easy that you can implement in your business, by the way, that you're listening to. If you're listening to the podcast right now, it's just you do got to be strategic when you comes down to the volume of people. But it's something, if you can figure it out, I promise you is well worth the time of them going and serving someplace.
Right, and you can do this in clusters. It doesn't have to be team-wide. It can be clustered, but we will on a Friday, we will go together and find a local organization within the Phoenix metro area, and we will volunteer together at that organization. And giving back is a core value at RYNO. And a lot of that stems when you think about, or when I think about the values that we've created, it all stems from where we started and where we got here. And it's not easy to start a business. There have been it's financially challenging. It's draining. And there were times in the growth of this organization where Chris and I needed somebody to give back, and we needed somebody to help us. And I always felt like, man, if we can actually make this company work and we can get to a spot where we can reciprocate that, that's going to be one of my highest goals. And it's going to be one of my highest priorities, is so that we can give back. So part of it was just to be able to return those favors, maybe not directly to the parties that assisted us and helped us, but to be able to pay that forward. I also think when you go and you volunteer and you give back, it recalibrates your ability to process how difficult your day really is or isn't.
Yep.
Like, it's easy to get caught up in the minutia of work and be like, oh man, today was hard, and this customer said this, and this employee needed this, and this person's pissed at me about that. But in the grand scheme of things, especially when you volunteer at places that are foster children or abused women, homelessness, when you hear about those problems, it takes away from the fact that we didn't have Kramer in the kitchen this morning, or, Petra picked the wrong candy and somebody doesn't like it. Like, those things go away and it feeds your soul. Nobody leaves a volunteer day and is like, man, that really sucked to give back today. Now, they're hard. We've dug trenches. We've done a lot of physical labor, and we've come back really dirty. But at the end of it, you always come back like, man, that felt good. It feeds your soul. And I think that being a good employer isn't just about feeding your business. It's about feeding your employees, and their soul is a big part of that. So giving back and giving them that opportunity to experience those things without it being difficult or without it impacting their pay is important. And again, it allows them to respect your organization, respect each other, spend time together. So it can seem hard, and it takes some time to get there, but it is well worth the investment of the time to go do those things together.
That's good.
And we do it once a month, right? Once a month, every Friday.
Yep.
Yeah, one Friday.
One Friday.
I did one last month, and I dug a trench. And I'll tell you what, having a full inbox of email when I got back was not that big of a problem anymore.
Right.
So now you have a lot more new respect for our dear friends, Charlie and Kelly Sanders at Arizona Trench Company. Shout out.
I do, except
you got
for the fact
trench, except he called you out.
Yeah, he called me out. He was like, 18 inches, huh? I'm like, come on, man. This is really hard.
You said more like 3. So another thing that you have to do, and I love that you put it that way, that we kind of got to give back to the employee's soul. I thought that was really great. But the other important piece to this is education, right? Mm-hmm. Because we are a for-profit business, and the only way we can continue to be a for-profit is by growing our customers, right? Mm-hmm. And making sure that they grow their business because they're also for-profit. So important piece of that is not only, helping making them better human beings or giving them the opportunity to be better human beings, to feel better about themselves, to feel love internally, it's now making them smarter. So maybe talk about some of the education things we put in place to help make them become better.
Yep. So,
help them become better.
Education's also a core value, and it's important in an industry like digital marketing that's so dynamic and so competitive, and a landscape that continuously changes. We simply cannot do the same thing, and we cannot continue to be okay with just being what we were yesterday. So in order to do that, everybody has to be focused on improvement. So there's a couple of things. One is there is a monthly education requirement. Everybody at RYNO is required to do education. They've got all sorts of options. It doesn't have to be going to a class. It's not going to college. It can be reading a book, listening to a podcast, reading blogs, absorbing video content, training. Some people do conferences.
Yep.
So however they prefer to learn, I am open to, as long as they are growing and getting better. It's an important part for their growth, for their personal development, as well as for our customers. So education is a really big part of who we are, and I think how we continue to stay ahead of the curve in this landscape. The other thing is RYNO U, which is another element of education. It's in essence a curriculum that we created for the entire year, and different courses that we've assigned different topics to different people within our organization. Not all leadership. There's a lot of employees at all different levels, and it allows them to teach a class to other employees who have credit hour requirements that they have to participate in. And because of that, it allows the employees who are training the class, they do 45 minutes of training and then 30 minutes of question and answer. And it really helps them to be able to figure out, one, how do you prepare a presentation? Like, what does a deck mean, and why do you have to prepare a presentation? Training skills, public speaking skills. It's an education experience for existing customers. It's also future trainings that we can use for new hires that onboard. So it's not always about specifically them growing in what their practice or their job is at RYNO, but holistically growing them to understand what are their coworkers doing, what are their peers doing, what do we do as an organization for customers, and it makes them more well-rounded as a participant and as a leader or a facilitator of the class itself.
I love it. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. Go.
And probably the next one I think that is a good one that we use that also leverages education and critical thinking skills is committee processes. And this one's a hard one for I think business leaders to relinquish control, myself included. It took a long time. But creating committees of employees to make big decisions for your organization is important. And I'll give an example of that. We needed a new CRM. And for those that don't know, it's a client relationship. Sorry, I'm getting really distracted by the movement of Paul's computer.
It's my computer, actually.
What do you think I feel? I'm so dizzy.
Poor Paul.
So the CRM is where we hold all of our client relationship data and their phone numbers and their addresses and what we've committed to and all of those things. It is really easy when we need a new CRM for me to come through as the COO and say, this is the right CRM for us and this is what I've picked. And for anybody who's purchased software or been through these processes before, you know that nothing is going to be perfect out of the box. There is not any software or any tool you're ever going to buy that does it exactly perfect. Now, if I make that decision as the COO and I roll it out, what ends up happening is there's kind of murmurs about why this product sucked or this software sucked and how I didn't know or I didn't evaluate this one or I didn't do that. So instead of me making those decisions, I form committees. So the last one was a CRM committee, and I gave them 3 that I thought were good fits and told them to review 5 other ones. And they sat down and they did all of the demos. They did all of the pros and cons, all of the pricing. And they spent about 12 weeks doing that to come up with what did they think was the best option for our organization. And that was all different levels, all different departments. And ultimately they made a decision. I went with their decision. We've implemented that decision. But it creates an army of people within our organization if somebody is frustrated by it or doesn't think it was the right fit. I've got an army of employees that were part of that process that are like, no, listen, like we vetted out a lot of things. This one's the right fit. And here's all the reasons why. So it eliminates some of that and it gives them the ability to be aware of how decisions are made and that they're not always easy. It's collaborative. It forces them to be forward thinking about our growth and how those decisions, what the tool that we select doesn't just impact them, but other departments and other employees. So creating committees and forming groups like that for them to do collaborative work takes responsibility off of me, sure, but it also is a huge growth and learning moment for them.
So you didn't mention the Good Time Committee.
Yeah.
So we created a Good Time Committee. And what's the purpose of the Good Time Committee? To have a good time?
This is a big one.
Yeah, the Good Time Committee, their purpose is to plan our team builders and to plan our volunteer days. For many years, I've done that, and I felt like it was time to turn over the reins. So we've got a group of team members, again, all different levels of our organization in different roles, and they get together once a month and they plan out what is the next month's volunteer day or team builder, what are we eating? But they also get to plan out extra fun things like maybe potlucks in the office or kindness week that we did last week. Random act of kindness week. So
talk about that a little more, random, because that was a big deal. Like We were all in the fields last week.
Go ahead.
I wasn't here, so I wasn't in the fields.
That's right.
Sorry, guys.
Chris.
I was in Costa Rica at my retreat getting the fields.
I talked about this on the Chris Confession a little bit, but I'll kind of give it to you super fast.
Right. Yep.
It was pretty amazing to watch our Slack, which is our internal communication, on random acts of kindness was employees doing random acts of kindness for other employees. And so they would share in our Slack channel the things that they were doing for others, which was awesome to see this long list of all the kind things that people were doing for one another, and then the reactions to them and the replies to them. Mm-hmm. You want to talk about a place everybody's like feeling the love? That was pretty cool. And then what was cool is it spurred off people doing random acts of kindness for others outside of the company, which is which was so fantastic. So that was a really cool idea. I don't remember who's. So well done.
Good time committee. Yeah.
They crushed it.
I loved coming back and just looking at all of the historical Slacks and seeing, I was like, oh, I can't believe I missed that. So
it was pretty awesome. So because we're getting late into the podcast, I want to segue super fast into one other thing that's really important. And then we'll have to finish with this too for the sake of time. And just so Kyle, appreciate you holding my computer while it charges so that way we can see Paul's face. You're doing
I've
good.
been trying to figure out, did they put my face on something?
Yeah, no. So he's literally holding the computer because I forgot to plug it in between using it. So anyhow, last thing is, now listen, if you're listening right now, you either are working with family, a spouse, or friends at your company, or you have, and it's either been good or really bad. And I find that I think a lot of times maybe it goes more bad than good. But we've experienced, well, I guess we've kind of had some both, but I think we've been mostly successful with it, and I genuinely believe it's because of some of the things we put in place. But even more specifically for you and I, is we learned, or we had to learn about a 1A and a 1B. And when am I the 1A and you the 1B, and in which situations would you be best equipped to handle it? So you're the 1A and I'm the 1B. It seems like I might be the 1B more frequently than the 1A. And I'm okay with that. But that's something that you do have to, if you're struggling with the decision making and you have a lot of shifts in the kitchen, somebody's got to be a 1A and a 1B. But also, so I want to talk about that piece. But I also want to talk about understanding when you have family come and work for you, or you have friends come and work for you, that there is a straight up hard line and accountability that comes with that. And so, can you talk about, because I feel like we've done a pretty decent job. We have quite a few. We have friends that work here. We have family that works here. Can you just talk about what can make that successful, or what's made that successful for RYNO?
Yeah, I think that having family, like if you consider yourself the RYNO family, whether they're an actual family or friend family, shouldn't make a difference. Like, family is family, and a lot of that really comes back to fairness and holding everybody accountable to the same standards, direct communication, even when it's hard. And I think sometimes it can be harder when it's a spouse or a friend or a family member. But in fairness to all of your employees, you need to make sure that you are a direct communicator, that you hold everybody to the same standard, that they've got the same amount of accountability, the same rules, same requirements that apply to them, but also that you hold the line of when it's personal and when it's business. And for me, it's naturally and clear cut a really easy process. Like, if something's hard at the office, I don't leave here and think about, if I was going to dinner with that person that night, it's just not part of my process to even worry about what happened at work, because that dinner is a social dinner, and I'm worried about who they are as a person and what is that relationship. And at that point, my time spent with them is to pour into them as a friend or a family member, not to pour into them as an employee. So knowing when to hold those different and to be self-aware enough to, if you're going down the wrong path, to pump the brakes and back out of it and not have those conversations when they're not appropriate is a big key element. Yeah,
and I think one thing that we've done that I believe you implemented in our interview process was sharing not only what's great about being a RYNO employee, but also some hurdles that they're inevitably going to see within whatever role it is. So we're being very transparent, which another one of our core values, with what the experience is going to be like working here. But it's really holding the line. And once you if you have these positions that they're going to fill, that they have specific tasks they have to do, and you hold them accountable to those tasks, you cannot let them slip. Like you
Right.
cannot, and especially when it's family, because then everybody's looking at it like, oh, you got that position because you're, your family or whatever. But
Well, it's not fair to them as people either, right? Like giving somebody a free pass because of their connection to you isn't fair to them. It doesn't develop them. It doesn't contribute to their growth. It doesn't enhance the experience of whomever else they work with, whoever they're impacting. So when you're making decisions like that, you really do still have to consider the global impact to your organization. And it's not about that one-to-one relationship. It's about what it means for everybody.
yeah, great. I love it. You have anything
Brilliant.
else, Paul?
I was just going to say you do a remarkable job of that, and it's so much easier to hear you say it than actually like apply that if you're listening to this and you've got family that works with you. Like I've seen you shut it off at 5 o'clock and go right into, I mean, even with disagreements with Chris, you're like, okay, no, now you're my husband and the father of my children. So we're going to like, it's like nothing just happened an hour ago.
Yeah.
So it's pretty remarkable. It's
And
like your superpower.
And that's not normal. I don't think it's hard to shut it off.
Yeah.
It's like we have had to practice that and even like stop each other and be like, we got to pick this up tomorrow because now I have to go do these things together. But I've also used it, husbands, if you're listening, I've also used this as a time to, when she gets mad at me at home, which never happens.
Maybe once.
But
Once or twice.
when she gets mad at me at home for something that was probably ridiculously to be mad at, I'll use the fact that she has to talk to me at the office to work my way through it. So by the time we get back home, she's kind of like, well, she's had to talk to me, so it's a good tool to use. So
Yeah, it can't give him the silent treatment all day at work, and he suddenly on those days has a lot he needs to work with me on. He needs my opinion. He suddenly cares about my opinion on what he's doing a lot more.
He's like, hey, what's the Wi-Fi password, man?
What do you think about this? I've been noodling this, and I really need your opinion. I'm like, I know exactly what he's
I really
doing.
would like let's just go ahead and go back through operations again. How can I help? You know, I've always been thinking about how can I help.
That has never come out of your mouth.
So first off, thank you. I know we're getting close to like an hour into this podcast, and Kyle's arms are getting tired from holding the computer. But you're good. Okay, so he said he can keep going all day. He's like going to do wall sits here in a minute. Go ahead and do squat. There you go.
I think humility and self-awareness too, like in the 1A and 1B point, like
Oh my gosh.
you have to have humility to know like this isn't my strength, and as much as I want to have opinion or I want to make this decision, it really isn't my strength or my skill set. And you also need to be really self-aware of what your skill sets are and what they're not. And because we're naturally so different, I think it's an easy line. In some businesses that might be harder if you're very similar, but because we're naturally different, I think those lines are easily drawn without even us verbally articulating it to say, this is obviously my 1A and that's your 1B or vice versa.
Yeah, and I would say if you struggle, because there is a natural division there that makes it a little bit easier. One thing that we've done as a leadership team is we're reading through the book Traction and doing some things that can kind of help put those things in place for you. I would recommend that. Like I've read through, I think, chapter 6, but we're as a leadership team, like on chapter 2.
Just going into chapter 2. Yeah.
But even like so far, I see why it's like why people kind of rave about it. And every time I bring it up, I feel like a lot of organizations have read it. So it's an easy read. I hate reading, but it's an easy read.
I think that we're going to get a lot of value, and just to compound on that is we were trying to read it as an executive team, and we were doing it. And as we got a little bit through, we were like, you know what, this makes sense for the whole leadership team.
Correct, yeah.
So we're reading one chapter at a time. Every other week, we are meeting for an hour and a half to talk about what did that chapter mean? What did we learn? How does it apply? What should we get out of it? And I would say that last meeting was probably one of my favorite leadership meetings we've ever had.
Yeah,
I felt like it was so engaging and so involved. And I really think going through this process with them and not just doing it ourselves is going to be a big growth opportunity for them as leaders within the organization.
Yep, totally agree. And listen, if it feels like, man, I don't know how to like really conduct that, you can Google like Traction EOS. Employee operating systems coaches, and I guarantee you there's one in your market somewhere that can help you do it, or you can find them online too to help guide you through it. But you have help. But it's a good recommendation, I guess, if you don't really know where to start, maybe start there. Thank you. I know that of all the people in this company, your time is very, 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 very limited. And so thanks for taking the hour to be with us on the podcast and to help our listeners. And I certainly know that the things that you've just shared in our business have helped us kind of on our up and to the right movement of the business. For those who don't know what that means, it's the rocket ship that we're on and the growth of the company, but it's not just the growth of the business itself, it's the growth of the staff, which is equally as important. So hopefully you can take some of those things and share them. And I think what was really cool on making us feel like, yep, we're doing the right things is when you go and sit with these billion-dollar company people who are like, holy shit, that's fantastic. I'm going to implement that. It's kind of a nice little pat on the back. So thank you for being the backbone of this business and being such a great human being with a good heart. And again, thanks for the time on here too. And listen, Anna is, I would give out her email address for people to reach out to. I'm not going to do that. However, if you reach out to the Point podcast, go to the Facebook page, like it, go to the Instagram page, like whatever, and you reach out, I promise you, if you wanted to connect with her, we will make that happen.
I am happy to help brainstorm ideas of how to implement things if you're not sure how to do it.
Thank you for joining me in TP.
You're welcome. Thanks, guys, for having me.
Yeah, so I'm going to finish up with one last thing, again, like I normally do, and that's reading off a review. And this one is from C-Shay96. C-Shay96. And the title is Improves Your Day to Day, 5 stars. Do we ever put anything on here other than 5 stars? Do we have anything other than 5 stars?
I don't think so.
We don't have,
You don't. I actually looked on the plane, and there are nothing but 5-star reviews.
Hell yeah. Way to go, listeners. Thank you. Let's add more to it. I want to read more. I want to start reading multiple per episode. So the C-Shay96 says, if you work in home services and you're looking for something that'll actually make a difference in your day-to-day, this podcast is for you. The tone is fun and playful, but the material is legitimately helpful for HVAC, plumbing, electrical businesses, and marketing. So thank you, C-Shay96. That is exactly what the purpose of the podcast is, to get to the point. We appreciate you guys so much, and please leave us a review. Okay? Listen to the end of this podcast. I'll tell you exactly how to do it. We want to hear those reviews. Until next time, we'll see you. Listeners, thank you so much again for listening to this podcast week after week. We are extremely grateful. Again, the whole purpose of this podcast is to give back to the home services industry that we love so much, whether you're a RYNO or not. We really appreciate all the subscribers. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please go in and subscribe, and you'll get all the episodes sent to you automatically weekly. Also, we have really enjoyed your feedback. It's so meaningful for us when we get to read the nice comments that you guys put. So keep doing that. And if you don't know how to do it, here's what you got to do. You search for To The Point Home Services on Apple Podcasts. You click on our profile, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and hit write a review. And be honest and share your story and how the podcast has impacted you and your business. Thanks again from the bottom of our hearts at To The Point Home Services Podcast. We appreciate you.